Today's Neville Goddard conversation is titled Return to the Ideal Inner Conversation. So we spoke in the last discussion the importance of recognizing the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Feeling of the wish fulfilled is identifying with something that you desire to see brought forth, a vision. Now, in this experience of life, we go through a journey to realizing our vision. And what I've recognized as a result of working with this information, since I started consciously working with this information back in 2004 with Think and Grow Rich, is that I have the power to facilitate the journey via my inner dialogue, inner conversations. So thus it's important for us to return to some of the understandings of accurate inner conversation. And we've been speaking about the importance of recognizing fears, doubts, indecision, and insecurity, to transcending past identification with. Now, this important nuance point is the world of difference on how the theater plays out on the journey to realizing our vision. What I mean by that is what we identify with is what we dwell in. And the simple aspect of this is when you enter the state of mind that's one with the vision, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, as you remain in this ideal state of mind, what you notice is you have accurate thinking regarding fears, doubts, indecision, and insecurity. We call this the encouraging inner voice. Now, there's a very important book that I like. It's called The Heavenly Life by James Allen. And he says something very, very profound in there. He says, "Say unto yourself, I will live in my ideal now. I will manifest my ideal now. I will be my ideal now. And all that tempts me away from my ideal, I will not listen to. I will listen only to the voice of my ideal." So this internal dialogue from the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the state of mind that's one with the vision, is what I also refer to as the true inner voice. It is distinct from mental chatter. And this internal conversation is what we want to encourage. It helps us understand if we are going into different states of mind. We practice a higher degree of presence when we're able to appreciate this internal inner voice that guides us. We can also look at this as intuition. And so he states, in the awareness of being, all things are possible. He said, "You shall decree a thing, and it shall come to pass." This is his decreeing, rising in consciousness to the naturalness of being the thing desired. As he expressed it, and I, if I be lifted up, I shall draw all men unto me. If I be lifted up in consciousness to the naturalness of the thing desired, I will draw the manifestation of that desire unto me. Now, this is an important recognition here. The thoughts of fear, doubt, indecision, insecurity are ideas, and we have a preference in the matter if we want to identify with them, dwell in them, or not. We have a preference in the matter as a result of lifting ourselves up in consciousness. Now, this journey of lifting ourselves up in consciousness is very well articulated by David Hawkins in his book, Power versus Force, as well as Letting Go. He actually has a consciousness scale, which for me, it's been very helpful for me because I was able to recognize where I was operating from as far as thinking goes. Now, this consciousness scale is one where if we look at it, and I don't have it in front of me right now, we'll see that there are different levels of consciousness. certain kinds of thought processes, or what we are imagining, or what we are thinking, seem to bring us into different states of consciousness. Some of these states of consciousness seem to encourage certain fears, doubts, indecision, insecurity, and so forth. One of our goals is to actually practice more so, remaining more in an elevated state of consciousness, which is in alignment with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, the higher states of consciousness, in which he refers to as peace, joy, love, bring forth interesting insights on how to facilitate accurate inner conversation in relation to our vision. From an inner conversation of peace, such as, I deserve to have what I desire. I know that some way, somehow, it's going to reveal itself. It's easier for me to maintain my flow every day. If these kinds of internal conversations seem to stimulate certain states of mind that are related to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, then this is the kind of inner conversation we want to have within ourselves. Same is to be said when it comes to love. So Neville Goddard says, you will find within this deep of yourself all things are divinely possible. Everything in the world which you can conceive of being is to you, within this present formless awareness, a most natural attainment. So when we imagine something, then we can ask ourselves, do we really want to identify with it? It's essentially, what are we saying I am to? What are we thinking? What are we assuming? What are we believing? What are we imagining? We have the ability to identify with whatever it is that we are thinking and imagining if we want to. Perhaps in certain states of consciousness, maybe deeply identified with shame or something like that, we seem to allow ourselves to identify with the mental chatter, which the true inner voice is distinct from mental chatter, speaks internally from the perspective of peace, love. And so the feeling of fear, or the feeling of doubt, or the feeling of uncertainty, we still have the ability to transcend past those interpretations and achieve what it is that we desire from a place of flow. Now think about this in your own life. As I reflect back on my experiences, I noticed that every vision that I had that I was able to bring forth, and now I've had thousands of conversations with other individuals in consulting and so forth, where we looked at their past successes, their past desires, when they had a burning desire, you could say, borrowing the lingo from Think and Grow Rich, and committing to visions that they were brought forth at some point. They were able to realize it, that they did have moments where they experienced fear, doubt, indecision, and so forth. When they begin to identify with that kind of thinking, they experience more convolution and stress on the journey, yes, because they had identified with those states of mind, those states of consciousness. Some point in the journey, we were finding that they were encouraging certain kinds of inner conversations, such as all things are possible. Some way, somehow, I'm going to achieve my vision. Whatever it is that I'm experiencing right now doesn't have to hold me back. I will be able to get through this, or some kind of internal dialogue that is more in alignment with the end. We call this the fourth dimensional inner conversation. Speaking as the unseen is seen and the unseen becomes seen, both the journey and the destination, aspects of the journey to the destination. And we all have these experiences ourselves. As I reflect back on my experiences in conversation with others, and I'd like you to do the same, this releases a lot of unnecessary friction of being scared of fear, doubt, indecision, and insecurity-based thoughts. which seem to create reactivity, which brings us into different states of mind. And then as a result of it, could play out as certain kinds of theater, certain kinds of interactions with people, certain kinds of situations in our environment, and so forth. However, those things don't need to hold you back from achieving your vision unless you want to create that theater, identify with it further. The truth of the matter is, you can always return back to a level of awareness where you remember, and the key word is remember, that all things are possible and that you have the ability to identify with certain kinds of thinking, whatever it is that you would like, be it fear-based, doubt, insecurities, and so forth. Those may be certain kinds of thinking patterns that you have identified with in the past. However, it doesn't represent who you are right now, unless you want it to represent who you are right now. As the quote from James Allen had articulated, that you will live in your ideal now, that you will listen to the voice of your ideal now. And this allows us to not dwell upon certain past thinking and bring us back to more of where we are right now, and then allow us to engage deeply in this present moment, which is the journey to realizing the vision, or, as I like to say it, reality rearranging to reflect the vision. And so he quotes, "I am the vine and ye are the branches." Consciousness is the vine, and those qualities which you are now conscious of being are as branches that you feed and keep alive. Just as branch has no life except it be rooted in the vine, so likewise things have no life except you are conscious of them. Just as branch withers and dies if sap on the vine ceases to flow towards it, so do things in your world pass away if you take your attention from them, because your attention is at the sap of life that keeps alive and sustains the things of your world. So what this suggests is, on the journey to realizing our vision, we can return back to the thinking pattern, the ideal way of looking at our vision, and relate whatever it is that we're experiencing right now over to that, by recognizing first that A, all things are possible. And some way, somehow, no matter what it is that you're experiencing right now, you have the ability to transcend past it. And the easiest way to do this is to change the internal conversation, such as, for example, what James Allen had shared with us. Which, by the way, to also add to it, he said, "Now is thy reality in which time is contained. It is more and greater than time. It is an ever-present reality. It knows neither past nor future, and is eternally potent and substantial. Every minute, every day, every year is a dream as soon as it is past, and exists only as a picture in the memory." So, at every moment we have an opportunity to return back to the state of mind that's one with the vision. And so if we find ourselves thinking about things excessively, for example, certain kinds of thinking in relation to fears, doubts, indecision, and insecurity, transcending past, those aspects are truly not who you are. You are divine perfection. You can, if you would like to, identify with certain kinds of thinking in regards to those areas. A person can subconsciously identify with certain interpretations in regards to those areas. That's why it's important to go in and identify the programming and change the programming using the subconscious mind work. And still, one of the most effective ways that I found was what I learned from Think and Grow Rich. And it was the thing that changed everything in my life as far as working with the subconscious mind. And it was the principle of autosuggestion. It was essentially to say to yourself, repeat to yourself the statements that would imply that you are that person, and the statements that would relate over the kind of thinking that would be accurate to that person. And to put them together in affirmations and read them in the morning and read them before going to sleep. Now, because we are encouraging those kinds of affirmations, those kinds of inner conversations, by being conscious of them and saying it to ourselves, we begin to identify with that kind of thinking. For example, if a person finds themselves overly identified with doubt-based thinking in regards to the vision, as in they doubt that they will be able to achieve the success, they might write a autosuggestion statement that goes something like this: I recognize that I have the ability to discern as to what is true for me and what is not. Upon recognition, I realize that I am transcendent to my thinking, and I have the power to think, and I receive the accurate thinking within, which I can identify with, that allows me to transcend past anything that appears to hold me back. And the key word is appears. It's the interpretation that we want to change within ourselves that is giving power to what appears. As he says here, just as a branch withers and dies if the sap of the wine ceases to flow towards it, so do things in your world pass away if you take your attention from them, because your attention is at the sap of life that keeps alive and sustains the things of your world. So we want to allow reality to rearrange to reflect our vision. We want to encourage certain kinds of thinking. We want to place ourselves in certain kinds of environments. And we want to carry on certain inner conversations, consume certain information that is encouraging of our vision. That way, those thoughts become what we are saying I am too. Such is the case with the principle of autosuggestion. We can believe certain interpretations, knowing that we are the only ones that can allow those interpretations to go into the subconscious. And what is suggested is to believe in the accurate interpretations that are true to the vision. In relation to what David Hawkins refers to, the interpretations from the perspective of love, the interpretations from the perspective of peace. Now, these interpretations are found within yourself. You can find these interpretations by releasing from the reactivity-based thinking in the moment. And as mentioned, if you have challenges in the moment, note those things down, and perhaps at a later point in the day, by yourself or someone in your mastermind, you can have a conversation about those thought processes, and you can reconcile it within yourself to create autosuggestions or affirmations or visual scenes that would imply that you are the person that is true and accurate to the love or peace-based thought processes that you discover after you recognize that you were not those things that were bringing forth unnecessary friction in regards to fears, doubts, indecision, and insecurity. You were not that thinking. And so, when you release from that thinking, what you will notice is things begin to change. As he says, you are at this very moment drawing unto your world that which you are now conscious of being. So, a very important key distinction here. You are at this very moment drawing into your world that which you are now conscious of being. Now you can see what is meant by you must be born again. If you are dissatisfied with your present expression of life, the way to change it is to take your attention away from it, that which seems so real to you, and rise in consciousness to that which you desire to be. So going back and reimagining the ideal scenario, thinking of it differently, carrying on an inner conversation with yourself from the perspective of peace and love in relation to whatever that attribute is. Or, you've heard me mention this many times, which I had learned also from Think and Grow Rich, is to write down your definite chief aim on a card and carry it with you. Or you could put it in your phone, whatever you'd like, whatever's easier. I'm kind of old school like that. I was doing it since 2004, writing it on a card. And I'm going to continue doing it because it works. And when something works for me to bring me into a state of consciousness that is one with my vision, and it continues to work like the principle of autosuggestion, I tend to use it over and over again because it works. Now that may work for you, or perhaps you have another way that works for you. It's important to recognize and honor what works for you. This is the key thing. I would not want what I say to turn into a dogma. We're traveling into different states of mind all day long, and we're identifying to these states of mind by the thoughts and the feeling of the identification of those thoughts and assuming those realities as a result of the identification. And we have the power to change it whenever you'd like. And so he simply says, take your attention from one state of consciousness and place it upon another, is to die to one and to live in another. And so he says, you are told, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you. Get first the consciousness of the things that you are seeking and leave the things alone. This is what is meant by, ye shall decree a thing, and it shall come to pass. So, this five-sensory world is in the process of rearranging to reflect your vision. That is what's happening right now. Because you have already assumed your vision as done. You're on the journey to realizing this vision. And you have the ability to do it in a flow-based way, as we've been discussing. The first-class concept of self-based way, which was inspired by the conversation that he had with his teacher, Abdullah, who, when Neville wanted to go to Barbados first class, and at one point was almost settling for third class, Abdullah reminded him to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you. And his desire was first class to go to Barbados. And so he stepped back into the first class identity, which then was able to externalize. That's the key word. It externalizes as a reflection or symbolic meaning to the first class identity and the destination. And so he got the ticket to go first class to Barbados. That's still one of the most profound and important lessons that I have learned through all my research and study into the Neville Goddard information. That one simple story has such deep symbolism in it. All we have to do is remind ourselves that we are first class now. That's who you are right now. And number two, as a result of being in first class, all things are possible. Because in the first class way of thinking, all things are possible. And from there, we connect back to this true inner voice, the true inner guidance, the intuition. And to remind us, we can keep the card with us. Perhaps you might even consider writing on the definite chief aim card, as learned from Think and Grow Rich. I recognize that I am my first class identity wherever it is that I go. I recognize that this first class identity shall carry me all the way to the destination from the perspective of first class. As a result, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent of integrity and mutual benefit. That was also inspired by last Sunday's video, in which we brought up the Dr. Millikan affirmation. And so we're saying the same message again and again and again, because we seem to identify with certain kinds of thinking. And we have the power to change the thinking real time in the now and identify with the first class thinking. And or number two, if a person has a lot of challenge surrounding that, as it was my case as well when I first read Think and Grow Rich, I created my auto-suggestions. I continued to read my auto-suggestions every day. And I would start to notice that reality was changing to reflect that. I was starting to think differently. I was starting to behave differently. And people, environment, circumstance, and information was changing also in ways that I don't know how to bring forth that vision. And so he says, the reason men condition their desires is because they constantly judge after the appearance of things and see the things as real, forgetting that the only reality is the consciousness back of them. So there is an inner side to things. What we see here in this five sensory world, there's an inner side to it. And the power is recognition that the inner side of things is found within ourselves. As it is stated, you are told, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you." Get first the consciousness of the things that you are seeking, and leave the things alone. This is what is meant by, "Ye shall decree a thing, and it shall come to pass." Now, as we move forward towards the end of this year, 2021, and we sit down and we write our definite chief aims and our visions and our goals of what we want to achieve in 2022 and beyond, the moment that you write those goals down, you can commit to it in your imagination as soon as it is done, as Neville Goddard says. And then what we do is we live in and from that vision. And fears, doubts, indecision, or any kind of thinking regarding aspects of the journey in relation to the vision are interpretations that we can identify with if we want to, or we don't have to. And it is suggested in Power versus Force and Letting Go to identify with the peace, joy, love-based consciousness levels and the thinking and the talking from the perspective of peace, love, and joy. For example, if the person identifies with the Dr. Millikan affirmation, we see that it contains within it the components. Peace. I have a lavish, steady, dependable income. That's said from the perspective of peace. Joy. When a person says, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income, they feel the joy now, in the eternal now. I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. That's done from the perspective of love. Benefit for you, benefit for others, benefit for divine evolution. As I call that, the spirit of harmony. So I trust you found this to be helpful on your journey. Return back to the state of mind that's one with the vision. And if you have challenges regarding thinking, recognize that you are transcendent to the thinking, and you have the power to change the thinking permanently via the autosuggestion principle, as well as returning back into the state of mind that's one with the vision. Because the repetition of, as he says here, is emphasized. Consciousness is the vine, and those qualities which you are now conscious of being are as branches that you feed and keep alive. Just as a branch has no life except it be rooted in the vine, so likewise things have no life except you be conscious of them. Just as a branch withers and dies if the sap of the vine ceases to flow towards it, so do things in your world pass away if you take your attention from them, because your attention is at the sap of life that keeps alive and sustains the things of your world. So pick a goal, a vision, a definite chief aim, something that you desire to see brought forth. Remain committed to it, and order the inner conversations to be one with the vision from the perspective of love, peace, and joy. So let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. You can say, I know that all things are possible. I know that I shall decree a thing and it shall come to pass. I understand that I rise in consciousness, seek first the consciousness, and from there all things are added. I recognize that as I'm lifted up in consciousness, I receive the accurate thinking which I identify with and bring forth the journey from the perspective of first class on the way to realizing my vision. Through the process, I maintain internal peace that reality is rearranging to reflect the vision from the perspective of Wu Wei. I know what to do, when to do, why to do, and what not to do from the guidance within of intuition to bring forth my vision from the perspective of flow, love, and peace. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.